Welcome to Barnstable Today. I'm Nick Cortez. We're continuing our look at the Town Council's first hearing on the fiscal year 2012 budget, which was held last Thursday evening. Today, we'll focus on an interesting discussion and a compromise that led to an unprecedented change in the way that the annual town grant to our village libraries is allocated. As you may know, the Town Library Committee in recent years developed a controversial new funding formula in that it puts the Hyannis Library at a significant disadvantage as compared to the other village libraries. Here, Town Manager John Klim provides some background on what precipitated this situation.
We recall some 6 or 8 years ago that I, as the trustee of the Kirkman Trust, agreed to fund a study of our libraries with the support of all of our libraries, with the design of trying to look for efficiencies and areas where there could be more collaboration in cost savings amongst our library. We hired a gentleman named Mr. Cohen, who I think did a terrific job for us, and many of the recommendations that were in that report have since been implemented by our libraries. One of the issues that Mr. Cohen brought up was the issue of funding. And he originally came up with a funding formula change that changed the historic funding formula that was utilized here in the town of Barnstable, with one huge caveat, and that was that Mr. Cohen, not only in his study, but to me personally, said that his major recommendation was that if we implement a new formula, that we hold library appropriations harmless. In other words, that we appropriate, that we institutionalize or implement a formula change over a period of years in the future with new money, when new money became available, and that we not penalize any of the existing libraries. And that's exactly what we did for a period of several years. Another recommendation that Mr. Cohen made was that after 2 or 3 years, the library committee should revisit the funding formula and make recommendations to me, the town manager, which is exactly what happened. But in that change, the commitment to hold all libraries harmless was eliminated. And so, as you recall, several years ago, at the request of the library committee, I implemented the first year of a 3-year change in the formula that had modest implications to most libraries and significant implications to one library, the Hyannis Library.
After the new formula was adopted, Hyannis Library trustees and supporters began to voice their concerns that if it were fully implemented, the funding formula would force the library to close. In response, the manager commissioned library consultant Nancy Ray to look into the claims and formulate her own conclusions.
He concludes by saying, after evaluating the 3-year phase-in proposal of the library committee, when fully phased in, this is a quote, when fully phased in, the new formula will cut the Hyannis Public Library funding by at least 32% below fiscal year '09, not including any additional reductions from the town's library budget. With these dramatic cuts, in fiscal year 10, the library is crippled. In fiscal 11, the library is on life support. In fiscal year 12, the library is essentially dead. That's the report that I received. It's a public document. It was given to all the library committee folks and any other citizen that was interested. So, having received that, I had a conversation with Harvey Erlin, the chairman of the library committee, and it was proposed that there be an immediate freeze on the additional implementation of the funding formula until the library committee could sort through this and make recommendations to me. That was last year. Now, there was supposed to have been a number of meetings that didn't happen. I know the dedicated volunteers are busy or whatever, but my expectation was by the time I was putting this next year's fiscal year budget together, that there would be a comprehensive set of recommendations for me to consider. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. So I had my conversation with Harvey Erlin. He asked me not to cut the library budget. I didn't cut the library budget. I didn't freeze the library budget. I increased the library budget for every single library. But since there was no resolution to the issue of the dramatic impact on Hyannis, I am proposing in here for at least 1 year that we bifurcate the appropriation to make sure that that funding formula is not implemented until we can come up to resolution and move forward. I don't want to see any one of our libraries devastated. And I'm being told by a national expert and a statewide expert that this funding formula is not the way to go. So the proposal before you is a 1% increase for every single library and a bifurcation until the library committee can come up with a recommended change, which I'm absolutely open to hear.
Essentially, the manager's proposal would have guaranteed the Hyannis Library the same funding it received this fiscal year, plus 1%, and would have protected it from any further cuts via the continued implementation of the new funding formula. It has been acknowledged that the Hyannis Library is different than the others because of its more urban location and the population it serves. But some councilors were not agreeable to language that would separate one library from the group. In response, Councillor John Norman proposed a different idea that, in effect, took the manager's proposal one step further.
I had a thought that since we have a committee that seems to be, as you said, fighting over the budget and deciding and not getting you the plan that you had requested, a more equitable funding formula, is that a suggestion I would have is that if we took the page 339 of the budget book, had what each library was paid in 2011. And if you added 1% to each one of those libraries and then came back with, or make an amendment to have each number frozen for 1 year, the town council will be sending a message to the town library committee that, look, we've taken the budget process away from you, the funding mechanism away from you for 1 year, and we're going to give every single library 1% more than they had last year to spend, and it's a budget item and it's fixed. You have 1 year to come back to the town manager with an equitable funding formula that's acceptable, and then we will go back to where, here you go, here's your lump sum, and divvy it up. But that's how I kind of see the problem arising, is that if we just take one library out and freeze it, now you've got a group that's going to fight even harder for the remaining funds and maybe create more of a situation. But that was my suggestion.
This is about the goal, and I think that we're on the same page in terms of what the goal is. But what you're proposing is not to split one library off. You're talking about splitting them all off, which I'm in favor of that too.
Just for 1 year.
I understand.
Just because they
but I just want to make sure that
yeah.
that's what we're talking about, splitting every library off. And if that's where
yeah, just for this 1 year, so that we're not taking one library, we're taking all the libraries, we're telling them what they're going to get for one fiscal year,
right.
And say, now you don't even have to discuss fiscal things this year. You can focus on coming up with an equitable formula. You have 12 months to do it. When you come back before us next year, we expect to see the manager with a smile on his face saying, a very equitable formula has been presented to me, it's acceptable to me, and I recommend it to the council for approval.
After some further discussion, the council chose to support Norman's proposal. So, for the first time in decades, the annual library grant will not be divvied up by the town library committee. Instead, the council will set the allocation for each library with the hope that, by FY13, a more equitable formula can be developed and control of the town funds can be restored to the library committee. Now, let's take a look at this week's remaining meetings. Well, that's all for now. I'm Nick Cortez, and we'll see you next time on Barnstable Today.